hurricane season is upon us, and predictions indicate that this year will be extremely active. So what does the hurricane season have to do with the Barbados Fire Service? Stay tuned and we'll find out more in this episode of the Firewall.
Protecting life and property. Call 311. Promoting fire safety. Call 311. Enforcing safety standards. Call 311. Even rescuing animals. Call 311. Jaws of life and accidents. Men and women of resilience. Teaching boat extinguishers. Rescue and lifesavers. Call 311.
When there is a crisis, you can depend on the Barbados Fire Service 311.
Now, if you were ever caught in raging floodwaters, you would understand the role the Barbados Fire Service plays during the hurricane season.
Our water rescue team actually is activated more so around the hurricane season than year-round. Because of the possible high incidences of flooding across several communities, the Barbados Fire Service found it necessary to have persons trained to be able to assist those persons that might be trapped within their homes, within their communities, you name it. So that formed the basis of the whole formation of the team.
But it's often our own actions that places us in danger.
I find that we still take a lot of chances whenever there is significant rainfall. I think that we need to get into the culture of encouraging people to stay safe where you are. Many people, our culture is, once the rain is falling heavily, let me try to get home. Let me try to get home. But there is an inherent danger in your quest to try to get home. Number one, there have been areas in Barbados that never used to flood, but you find that these areas are now flooding. There are some areas that we know will always be flooding. And for the most part, I think the Department of Emergency Management does a really good job at trying to sensitize those persons and to teach those persons that in the event of rising water, what to do. In other words, you know your risk. So operate within that particular perimeter. But it is those new areas, or it is those areas that people in their quest to try to challenge floodwaters find themselves in situations that the fire services are then called upon to be able to assist. You know, you find situations where people find themselves with water above the window of the car. I understand and I forgive those persons that might not know the area. But you should not have a situation where you cannot see the tires or the wheels of a vehicle ahead of you, or you are not sure what is the level of the water and you are still trying to beat that water. That is the sort of activity that we do not want to encourage.
It's those situations that press the Barbados Fire Service into action, but the department is advising that there are measures that should be taken until help arrives.
So we encourage people, once you are seeing water of a certain height, or if you have vehicles ahead of you and you cannot see the wheels of the vehicle, then that might be your cue not to trespass. I will want to encourage persons that once you recognize that your car, you recognize that the water is starting to trespass on your bonnet and all that, it might be a good cue for you to make your evacuation through the window and get to the highest point of your vehicle. And of course, we just can't say stay there. But I'm hopeful that you will be in a community of some type, because fortunately for us, God have always had it that it always happened in a community area where somebody can call the fire service. But I will not want for persons, especially if the water is moving, to try to get out of the water if they are unsure as the height of the water. So get to the highest point of the vehicle and try to attract the attention of someone, because it might not be possible to get a cell phone at that point, because the cell phone is probably submerging in the water anyhow.
Homes are equally vulnerable to flooding, as blocked waterways and drains often result in water building up during excess rainfall. And while the Barbados Fire Service assists in pumping off that water, they urge homeowners to take precautions before they become trapped.
Know your risk factor. Know if there is a history of flooding in the area. And I'll say to you, and I would have mentioned that before, if you know your area is one that is flood prone, then I advise for you to make your way out to safer harbor very early. Now, I know that is not always possible, but in the event that you think that there's going to be flooding, and I don't want for persons to get comfortable and say, it has never happened before, that can't happen up here, we live on a hill and all that. We have seen situations where because of, and I'm going to use the Barbadian terminology, backing up water, cause water to rise abnormally. And I want for persons to take control or take charge of their personal safety.
But should you become caught at home, here is some advice to follow until help arrives. Cut off all utilities such as the gas. Turn off the main breaker for the electricity. Get to the highest point of the house. Get the attention of a neighbor who can call 311.
I am Senior Fire and Life Safety Officer Ryan Glasgow. We are asking all Barbadians on observing any fire-related emergency, call before you click.
When there is a crisis, you can depend on the Barbados Fire Service 311.
Now imagine being trapped in your community after a disaster impact. Your home is damaged and all access roads into your community are impassable. The Barbados Fire Service is one of those agencies that will come to your rescue.
So now as a first responder now, we have to walk in. So that means we have to take all of our equipment in with us so that we can do what has to be done. One of the other things we have to look at is the vegetation. We may have trees and stuff like that down power lines. We may have homes damaged or homes wash off of the slide off of the foundation. So all of these are things that we know we would be faced with in a situation where that if something happens within a Scotland district, that we now have to try to mitigate as a fire department responding to an incident like that.
The St. John Fire Station has responsibility for the parishes of St. John, St. Philip, St. George, St. Joseph, and parts of St. Thomas, and mitigating the potential impact of disaster events.
A couple of weeks ago, we would have done a walkthrough in the Martins Bay area where we looked at some of the hazards that were posed to first responders responding to an incident in Martins Bay, where we look at how compromised the roads can be. We look at the environment, the vegetation that can pose a threat to vehicles and the rescue personnel going in. And we also look at the difficulties in actually getting in and then having to effect rescues and then to be able to evacuate those persons back to safety.
These types of rescues are primarily done by the Urban Search and Rescue Team of the Barbados Fire Service.
Given the hurricane season and given the fact that the Barbados Fire Service is responsible part and parcel for fire and for search and rescue, we play a vital role that if anything happens within country, if we are impacted either by a storm or we are heavily impacted by a hurricane, the Barbados Fire Service has an integral role in terms of responding and being able to go there and effect rescues. If there's any fires that are involved, extinguish those fires and try to make the environment as safe as possible. So we do have a very, very important role during any disaster.
But for the Barbados Fire Service, it's not just about putting on protective gear and heading into a disaster zone.
Search and rescue is no stranger to the fire department, because search and rescue normally exists within the fire department, where when you hear about search and rescue is fire officers going into a structure and searching for victims within a structure. And there are mechanisms in the fire service that deals with that. So we have a search team within a fire department that goes in and conducts searches within a structure. Then you have a RIC team And that RIC team is primarily made up of fire officers as well that's supposed to go in and rescue fire officers that are trapped. So search and rescue is no stranger to the fire department. But what we do now, we do urban search and rescue where we actually go into structures that has collapsed, that has been impacted by some form of disaster. Those structures are collapsed, and in urban search and rescue, we must be able to go into those structures safely, penetrate through whatever debris that is there, and search for victims. Given the hurricane season now, well, yesterday was one of our practice days where we will go through certain evolutions so that the personnel will get more au fait and comfortable with certain evolutions. But as a fire department and at St. John Station, we try to practice as often as possible. Once we are not attending to any fires or any incidents, we try to practice as much as possible, because if you don't use something, you lose it. So we try our best to continuously tie knots, deal with mechanical advantage and different stuff that we would normally do if we have to respond, because we need to have persons as confident and competent as possible when responding to an incident, because again, the victim is what is our primary concern.
Electrical fires also keep firemen busy during bad weather.
And it may start from a tree, but based on certain conditions, it may extend to a structure, right? So those are things that we normally look out for in the hurricane season, because it may start with just a limb rubbing on a wire, then the wire catches fire, and then that fire travels down to the structure, and then the structure. So it is a whole chain of events that occur from electrical fire, right? But those are some of the things that we face, and then we also deal with accidents and stuff like that as well. So we also have maybe car fires during that particular period as well too.
I am Research and Planning Officer in the Barbados Fire Service, Andrew Taylor. Between January 1st and March 12th of this year, we've recorded 16 residential fires. One house fire is one too many. Remember, call 311 for help.
When there is a crisis, you can depend on the Barbados Fire Service 311.
Now we've looked at how firemen go about rescuing persons in disaster. But before they can do so, they must first secure their families and their stations.
We do work in collaboration with other agencies as well. So that is part and parcel of the operation within Barbados, which works on the DM. So that is part and parcel, but the fire service itself has a role and responsibility that we take care of during hurricane season. Once that time of the year comes around, the administration goes into a mode of preparation, which it does look at all of the fire stations to see what the fire station have, and make sure that the standby generators are fully fueled. You have to make sure that the stations are well secured, and also that there's food, rations based at each station, so that the persons working during the impact could have food to sustain them for at least a 24-hour duration.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Firewall. Join us again next month when we'll bring a new edition to you. Remember, when you see a fire, serious accident, or find yourself trapped by floodwaters, call 311.